Hello, I'm Scott Barrett, joined as always by John Proctor. Today, just like on Saturday, we have Seth Yates from Roto Grinders with us. We'll be talking about today or tomorrow's Thursday slate of preseason games. Hopefully, last week you took our advice and faded the Hall of Fame game because the top scorer from that game scored 0 points because that game didn't happen. Uh, Terrific call by Seth, knowing that the grounds crew was going to totally screw that up, or whatever the case was. Johnny, Seth, how you guys doing?
Good man.
Oh yeah, I'm great. Funny, on Sunday I was actually on a Periscope right before the game, and I am telling people if you play the Hall of Fame game, these are the guys you can play, and then everybody in chat's just like, "Oh no, it's gonna get canceled," and I'm like, "Well, that was a waste of time."
I was so excited to play Josh Ferguson. I had like
Man, I was.
oh,
I
but
faded everyone on that slate, so it just kind of didn't impact me at all. Well, actually, it did. Seth, you have some stats on us about maybe some of the fish out there who are guys who just didn't correct their lineup in time.
Yeah, it was crazy. Obviously the game was canceled well over an hour before it even kicked off. And it was all over ESPN, Twitter. RotoGrinders sent out an alert. But yet, out of the $3 big GPP, now granted this one filled on Saturday night, 15,686 teams in it. 5,120 people have at least one player in the Hall of Fame in their lineup. Some of them didn't submit a lineup at all. So basically, 33% of the field's already taken a zero. And only 10,567 of the 15,000 is even playing with the full roster. So if you're in that slate, I got 20 entries in that. So hopefully you guys got some in there too.
oh yeah, it's interesting. Oh, and I got out of kayak and I looked and I saw one of the Colts beat writers had replied to me. I asked about how much Josh Ferguson was going to play, and he just said a ton. And I was like adding Josh Ferguson into lineups, and then I get back on Twitter, and the game had already been canceled. I just had no idea. And I just see a tweet from Seth. It's like, this game is canceled. And I was heartbroken.
I do feel bad though. I don't want to make fun of the people too bad because for one, I hate beating people like that. That's just a terrible way to win. But for two, like I'm getting tweets from some people. They're like, "Man, I was at work or I was at church, wherever." I'm like, "Sorry, like no one was expecting a game to get canceled because of the field. The weather was fine,
Yeah,
and
and
it
just
wasn't weather related."
in the
Go
future for
ahead.
anybody, if that does happen to you and you have an entry or two and you're new to it, if you email them, they're pretty friendly when it comes to refunding those kinds of entries. So it's probably too late now, but for future reference for anyone who fucked up.
Yeah. The other thing is you're not completely. Like I said, 33% of the field's dead. But if you just have one player, a lot of people are going to take a zero. You're not dead. Don't give up on your Thursday teams. We'll give you some picks here that will get you back in this.
For sure.
All
So,
right, do you guys want to just dive right into the slate?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. What teams do you want to start off with, Seth? Do you have a preference?
Let's just run it in order of start time. So Tampa Bay at Philadelphia is the first game, I believe.
Okay. The guy that immediately jumps off to me, screaming right off my notes here, is Adam Humphries, who is white. And you know how I feel about white players in preseason. This is their chance. They got that grit. They're going all out, and yeah, he's fighting for the wide receiver 3 role. Or actually, does he have it locked down? I think Dirk Coder recently said he has it locked down. Is he a good player? Or are you looking more at Kenny Bell at wide receiver?
Well, what's going on there with Humphreys is Tampa doesn't list a slot wide receiver
Mm-hmm.
on their depth chart like some teams do. So technically Humphries is the starting slot wide receiver, but because they don't list that, they make him the right wide receiver number 2 behind Vincent Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
So really technically he's the starter anyways. But I'm definitely excited about him. The other guy I do like is Kenny Bell, like you mentioned. I think that Bell should slide into Jackson's spot. Jackson's questionable, and I mean, really, with preseason, if the guy's a name, and even with the no names, if you see questionable, it's probably no. So Bell should be starting, and both Humphries and Bell are going to get a crack at returning kicks in this too.
Is Austin Safarian-Jenkins the chalk at tight end this week?
Yeah, I love a lot of tight ends, so I would not call anybody chalk. We'll get to him, but Trey Burton for the Eagles I like.
Mm-hmm.
Let me run through my notes here.
And even on the Bucks, I mean, outside of ASJ, there's this Danny Vitale guy, or Vital, I don't know how it is, who's got this super back role that they've been talking about. I think he's probably like a interesting GPP dart throw.
Johnny likes Waller on Baltimore.
Yeah. Well,
Brady Bowman's been getting a lot of love on the Jags.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot as we get through these games.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to struggle to find tight end. Now, that said, I don't know that. I'm sure somebody will ask, well, should I play a second tight end in the flex spot? I still think that's a no. Like, you've got options for tight end, but Martellus Bennett led tight ends in catches last preseason, or at least of guys on this slate, and he had 11. Like, there's just, if you're getting 2 or 3 catches out of your tight end at 35 yards, you're kind of happy with that.
And that's 11 from a starting tight end who you weren't really rostering anyway. And if I remember right, I don't think he even played enough snaps to register on the initial preseason players that Scott pulled. So that's a big concern, that your leading tight end was someone that no one was even targeting last year.
Right. So at tight end real fast on Tampa Bay, so they're doing that weird thing that we mentioned on Sunday where Cameron Brate's listed as the number 1, and some people are theorizing that's a motivation thing, and some people are like, no, this is legitimate. So I could totally see Jenkins out there running with the 2s and 3s. I don't think that Brate's really in play for me if he's only going to play with the starters, but I don't think we know enough that I'm not going to take a chance there with all the other options.
You just said there's no chance of you playing a tight end in flex. What are the chances that you'd play a wide receiver in flex, or do you think you're really going to go running back there?
I'm probably going to go running back on this first week. Next week, I might consider the wide receiver, but the big thing that, like I mentioned on Sunday, if teams are only throwing the ball 30 times and there's 8 guys realistically getting a target plus tight ends and running backs, you might only get a few targets. It's tough to predict that. I'd rather have the guaranteed usage from a running back.
Yep, agree. And I think there's some really good running back plays on this slate.
We can get to one in a second. I know once we start talking about Philadelphia. But on Tampa, are there any running backs you're interested in with Martin and Trent as the starter and Sims a bit banged up?
So initially, I liked Sims. Last year, he caught some. I didn't pull the numbers, but he was a good PPR back, and I would have been interested in him. Now, Cotter did say that basically we're going to see 3, 4, 5, and 6 running backs, which is Mike James, Peyton Barber, Storm Johnson, and Russell Hansbrough, I think, but I'm not concerned about going that deep. I really think that it's Mike James here, and I don't know that you get more than 5 to 7 carries.
Yeah, I think Peyton Barber is interesting as a guy, like, if you really wanted to dart throw as a fourth quarter thing. He's a guy that was, liked a lot by, the draftnik community, so he was like a priority undrafted free agent for them, so he's interesting, but like you said, it's hard to pick a running back who's competing with 2 other guys for late carries.
Yeah, in those situations, I'd need to hear the guy is, like the third down back, the goal line back, and he's getting some carries. Because if I can get a touchdown, I'll take that.
Yep, I agree. And Mike James has caught some passes in the past as like a third down role. So, but man,
The running back I'm super excited about on this slate, probably more so than anyone else, and I know Seth feels the same way. Has to be Lord Byron Marshall, especially if Barner, who got hurt yesterday, doesn't play. You want to talk a little bit about him, Seth, and why you're all in on him?
Yeah, so you mentioned this before that Ryan Matthews reported to camp with a ankle injury. He's back practicing, but highly unlikely that he plays. Should see a little bit of Darren Sproles, and then Wendell Smallwood has a quad injury. He's already been ruled out, so we know that. And so it should just be Byron Marshall, Cedric O'Neal, and Sproles. Really, is there one more? I don't think there is, right?
I think that's it.
Cedric O'Neal, Smallwood, yeah.
Yeah, it's just right. So it's Barner if he's healthy, Byron Marshall, and Cedric O'Neal.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll want to check that pre-lock. But if Barner's out, then Byron Marshall's your cash game running back to me.
Yeah.
But of course, I'm an Eagles homer.
And I've read a few tweets from some beats too that they think if Barner does play, that he's probably only going to return kicks.
Yeah, I could see that. And then the other thing to pour some water on, I was about ready to go all in on Barner as I was trying to write my article, and then I realized I'm starting reading stuff, and Barner has struggled catching the ball out of the backfield, which is important in the West Coast offense. And a lot of people think that they're going to give these other guys a shot as opposed to Barner because they're better pass catchers. Byron Marshall played at Oregon. He had 1,877 rushing yards, 19 touchdowns on the ground, and he averaged 13.3 yards per catch for a total of 1,293 receiving yards. And that's over 4 seasons. But so, he can do it all.
Yep. Yeah, and he's a guy that's like a few of the dynasty guys are really we're big on. So he's definitely a talented guy, and he should really not have a whole lot of competition for carries and catches. So it's hard to not play him. I guess O'Neal if you wanna kind of be contrarian instead.
Yeah, and then I've mentioned this before. If Barner sits, I'll throw a couple GPP teams in where I'll just take both of them. Give me all of the carries in this game. If there's only 2 guys, if there's a touchdown, I'll get it, and I'll get all the rushing yards.
Yep, I'm with you there.
All right, moving on, we have Trey Burton, who you just alluded to. NJ.com has called him the best overall player in Philly's camp, but there's also 5 other tight ends on the roster. Why should we be excited about Trey Burton, Seth?
Well, Zach Ertz was hit low in practice, and he's been sitting, so that rules one guy out.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing about Burton is he's played extensively with the 2s and the 3s, so he's got quite a bit of familiarity with Wentz and with Chase Daniel. So they've both looked for him in red zone drills. So I think he's a good chance he gets a touchdown. And I've even heard that he was getting some reps at fullback.
Yeah, I read that too. So if he gets a goal line carry for whatever reason, that's a huge plus as well. But there's also tons of reports that the Eagles really want to prioritize getting the tight ends involved, and they just have so many injuries at wide receiver right now, as well as just that their wide receivers really struggled last year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Burton get a ton of work.
Yeah. And again, like we said last week, and like we kind of alluded to again today, tight end's pretty much like a crapshoot. You're kind of just banking on a touchdown, hopefully, if you're lucky. But I do like his potential this week. Our next slate then would be Washington against Atlanta. A guy I'm excited about, I don't know, is Rashad Ross. Last preseason, he scored 76 fantasy points. The second closest wide receiver only scored 50. I have no idea how sticky preseason fantasy points are year over year, but that's pretty exciting. I don't know. Seth, what do you think?
Um, See, last season was weird, and this is something I've mentioned time and again, that I like to target wide receivers and backup quarterbacks. Even this week, a lot of people are asking me, well, this third stringer might play the whole second half. Who cares? He's out there with the 6 and 7 wide receivers behind a terrible offensive line. But with Washington last year, we saw Robert Griffin and Kirk Cousins battling for the starting job. So it was basically Cousins in there in the second quarter just obliterating second-string defenses. So that's a lot of where Ross's production comes from, and some Colt McCoy too, who's still there.
Yeah, and that's something too. I mean, with the Skins at least. I mean, you have Josh Dotson, who should have been sort of somebody who they were going to feature, who's not. It's not going to happen because he is injured. So, and as long as Colt McCoy is out there, anyone who's playing with him has an advantage because he's like a really experienced backup versus some of the other scrub backups.
Yeah, the other thing is Washington does have like 14 receivers on their roster, but like you said, Doxson's on the PUP list, Diggs is out, and Jamison Crowder's out. So we're down a little bit, and then like obviously Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon are not going to play much. So that's where the Ross love comes from. The other guy that I like is Ryan Grant. He should start in the slot in place of Crowder, and he's been great in camp. Actually, he had I have it right here. He had oh no, I guess I didn't pull up his stats, but he had a great preseason last year as well.
Yeah, they were both
not
good
bonus.
guys. Let's see.
Real fast, we skipped over Eagles wide receivers. There's not much there. I just wanted to go back to it. The only thing to know there is that Jordan Matthews is out, and 2 backups that you haven't really heard of are out. I don't get that excited about the guys that are there, other than maybe Chris Givens. Josh Huff is playable. Paul Turner is going to return punts, and he's an undrafted free agent. And then Caleb Jones, a rookie out of Arizona. And sure, but like I said, if you love Burton so much and all those other picks, then it's tough to just you can't play all Eagles on your roster.
Right, and Givens is kind of like a deep threat guy. So I mean, if he catches a ball for like 50 yards or something, you're kind of happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Back to the Skins. So an interesting thing with the Skins though has been the sort of the discussion around the running backs with Matt Jones and Chris Thompson unlikely to play a whole lot, and everybody on Twitter loving Keith Marshall as the next up and coming starter for the Skins. What are you doing with Keith Marshall?
It's still a really crowded situation there. Basically, most teams are going to keep 4 running backs. That's probably what we can expect from the Redskins. And they've got 6 guys with a realistic shot at it. And you already know they're keeping the top guys. They'll get a long look at Marshall. They should get a look at Mac Brown. But Matt Jones should see some carries. Thompson will see some carries too. It's tough for me to see how all of them, obviously all of them can't get 10 carries. So I don't know that I love that situation.
Yep, I would agree with you. I mean, if you had to pick one, it's got to be Keith Marshall because he's probably the most likely to get an extended look out of everybody. But that would still be somebody you wouldn't want like a ton of exposure to.
Yeah. And obviously, we're going to get to some good running back situations other than Philly. I just don't see any reason to go there.
Yeah.
At quarterback for the Redskins, I do like McCoy. Obviously, Cousins is is playing, but just a series or two, and then it should be Colt McCoy for the rest of the first half, and then Sudfeld for the second half. I mean, depending on how it goes, that you can almost get 2 quarters out of Colt McCoy.
Yeah, and he's been an absolute stud in the preseason before. And I mean, he was a starting NFL quarterback, and he was like not completely terrible. So it's a big boost.
And the other thing I want to mention real fast on when a lot of times people are talking about these players in quarters, that's all quarters are not equal. I've seen a game where one team will go 3 and out, and then the other team will run an 8-minute drive, and the first quarter's almost over before they get the ball back again. So it's like, he played a quarter, but he played 2 series. So like, what you're really talking about is reps. Like, for example, with the Broncos, they've said that Sanchez and Simeon will get equal reps, like equal passes. Not necessarily the same number of plays overall, but they'll pass the same amount of times.
Yeah, and that's true where it's like if a guy is going to play a whole fourth quarter, if he's a receiver, that's like not that big of a benefit because there's going to be a ton of running out the clock in the fourth quarter because teams are ready to get out of there.
Right.
Speaking of receivers, I mean, I'm not really interested in the tight ends on the Redskins, or is there anybody that you're really looking at?
You could possibly talk me into Niles Paul or Logan Paulson. They're still pretty deep here.
Right, and my concern is like Paulson is like he's been with the Skins for a while. He's been in the league for a while. Niles Paul's been with the Skins for a while. I just feel like they don't really have a whole lot that they need to see with their tight ends. So I wouldn't be surprised if they just really didn't throw them the ball very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Like Niles Paul started some games last year, didn't he? Played 4 quarters and didn't do anything.
Yeah. So I meh there, but yeah. I mean, so Falcons. I'm not really looking at quarterbacks there since they have 4 of them. What's your thought?
I thought it was interesting what Coach Dan Quinn said. He said basically his approach to preseason is guys that are game ready, and especially veterans, like if he knows they're ready, he's going to probably give them a quick hook because they don't need the reps. But guys that reps do matter are the younger guys. He wants to get them some game action. The way I read that is Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, you're good. You can play a couple of plays and you're out of here.
Yeah, and that's kind of how if you knew Schaub was going to play like the whole first half or something, I think he's somebody I would look at, but we don't know that.
And I have seen some thoughts that the Falcons actually want to get a look at Sean Renfree and Matt Sims, so they want to get Ryan and Schaub done as quick as possible and give those guys the reps. Which honestly, that kind of makes me like the Redskins' defense more than anything. Sean Renfree's been bad, and Matt Sims is nothing crazy either. So
yeah, and even Matt Schaub's bad.
Yeah.
So something that I didn't realize too with the Falcons, I guess I had missed this earlier, is that Taron Ward is out. So they're kind of down to 2 end of the game running backs. I mean, how much do you like Gus Johnson and Brandon Wilds?
I'm finding that I like Gus Johnson, and everyone else seems to be more on Brandon Wilds. It's tough to handicap. I don't know a whole lot about these guys. I don't have time to dig into every single guy. I know Gus Johnson was playing for Tennessee last year, wasn't he?
I know he was somewhere.
Hey guys, I don't mean to jump in and correct you, but Niles Paul actually didn't play any of the preseason last year. He broke his foot. But the year before that, he did play 3 games and only see like 5 targets and was fairly unspectacular.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely better tight ends than what's available on Washington, especially if it ends up being a four-way split there.
Gus Johnson was the guy on the Cowboys last year that people were like touting to do something, and then he didn't do anything.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Gus Johnson and Brandon Wild for sure. That's a good 50-50 split, and it's something. In tournaments, it's a good way to get off Byron Marshall, the Jets situation that we'll get to in a minute, and some other situations where there's pretty thin at running back.
Yeah, and then go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, the wide receiver thing is like really interesting to me. Right now in our YouTube chat, we have some people talking up Aldrick Robinson. I know Julio Jones earlier this week called him like a great deep threat. So he had great speed, great hands. So he was talking him up. But at the same time, there's also Justin Hardy, the slot guy, who led all wide receivers in preseason snaps last year. What are you doing with the wide receivers?
I love Aldrick Robinson. Like, he's going to be on a lot of my teams, no doubt about it. The guy was just absolutely insane last year. Let me see if I have that open still. You have his stats offhand there, Scott?
Yeah. Let's see.
Oh, here I have it. I'm showing 11 for 150 and a touchdown. Is that right?
I'm stuck in 2014. Yeah, that's probably right.
And then the other guy that we like here is Justin Hardy. I believe he had 11 for 130, but no touchdown for him.
And the other thing with Aldrick Robinson is that he played on the Skins before, so he has experience with Shanahan. So to some degree, they're familiar, which is a positive in preseason.
I know Johnny's super excited about their tight end. You want to talk about him?
Yeah. So one thing that I sort of like to target, not so much week 1, but more week 2 and week 3 of preseason is rookies who are looking to leap up the depth chart, who possibly can get starting roles. And I know the Falcons would prefer that at some point in the season Austin Hooper would overtake Jacob Tamme. So I like Austin Hooper a lot. I'm probably going to like him a lot for the whole preseason. And he was a pretty highly touted guy. I believe he was the second tight end taken off the board. So I'm definitely interested in him. I think he might play a lot.
Yeah, nice bump for him that Levine Toilolo is also out. So you got Tamme, Hooper, Tila Via, and Josh Perkins are your tight ends there. But really it's, Tammy's not going to play much. So you're down to kind of 3 guys. But Hooper's the one that they want to see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For sure.
All right, moving on. We have Carolina against Baltimore. Something you want to talk about the running back situation? I saw you mention something really interesting in your article.
Yeah, this one's interesting. Everyone's healthy here, so normally that would be in a void with we got Jonathan Stewart, Fozzie Whitaker, Cameron Artis-Payne, Brandon Wager, and Jalen Simmons. But even though everyone is healthy, Coach Rivera basically said they've only got room for 4 running backs. They consider their fullback Tolbert to be like their backup running back along with Whitaker. And so whoever doesn't make the team between Cameron Artis-Payne and Brandon Wager is going to get cut or end up on the practice squad.
Yep, and Cameron Artis-Payne is a guy that people thought was going to start last year when Stewart missed a game and they kind of mixed things up. So he has some NFL experience, so I think you could probably play both of them. I probably prefer Artis-Payne a little bit, but there's definitely a chance that Wager sees a little more reps because he's new to the team.
Yeah, Johnny, you kind of surprised me when you said that he leapfrogged or Fozzie Whitaker leapfrogged Cameron Artis-Payne for the number 2 running back role, or at least after Tolbert. where CAP got like 14 carries, 44 yards, and a touchdown in Week 17 last season. I don't know if Fozzie was maybe hurt for that or not, but yeah, I found that pretty surprising. I believe in Artis Payne's talent. I think he's probably the running back to own here, factoring in playing time. Unless you know anything about Wegger that I don't. The first time I've ever heard of his name was a couple of days ago.
Just a lot of beat reports that he's looking really great in camp. That's pretty much all I can find.
Yeah, you won't hear that about hardly anybody. Everybody's looking great in camp, so sometimes it's tough to weed through that. But I've heard the same thing. Everyone said he's been looking great, so gotta trust the guys on the ground with that stuff.
Yep, that's about all I've found.
My only notes for Carolina are with the running backs. You have a deep wide receiver crew, tight ends, quarterbacks. Anyone exciting you there, Seth?
Well, I know a lot of people are at quarterback. I'm sure some people around the industry will mention Joe Webb. So I'll talk briefly about this. They've only got 3 quarterbacks on the roster in Cam Newton, Derek Anderson, and Joe Webb. So once Cam finishes up, you got about a half for both of those guys. I pulled both of their stats, and basically in 10 more attempts last preseason, Webb only scored 27 DK points to Anderson's 21. So I'm telling you, even if you hear that Webb is getting the whole second and Anderson is only getting a quarter and a half, I still want Anderson if I'm picking there.
Yeah, and even then I'm probably not super excited about
it's not
that situation.
On wide receivers, just impossibly hard. They've got a lot of healthy guys and just a huge cluster. There's a lot of guys they want to get a look at. The one name I am seeing people mention is Kieras Garrett. He's looked good in practice. Well, he was looking good in practice. This week, both him and Brenton Burson have a lot of drops. To me, that's an issue. I think I'll like enough other wide receivers that I'm not even going to mess with it.
Yeah, and Garrett was like a priority undrafted free agent, but even then, obviously he wasn't good enough for them to take in the actual draft. And, they kind of like Stephen Hill, but he's always hurt, and so not really all that interested there either.
Yeah, Hill's just a speedster, and he's at the beginning of camp, they said he was looking great, and then a lot of people I've seen some of the beats saying that it doesn't look like he trusts his repaired knee 100%, like he's not cutting strong on it. So I think you got to avoid him unless you're just hoping for a bomb.
Yeah.
He's also been terrible throughout his entire career, so maybe that's another reason to avoid.
That's fair.
You think we're done with Carolina here? Anyone else?
Well, at tight end, you could maybe talk me into the guys looking for the 4th job in Bo Sandlin and Deaver. Well, hang on, no. Yeah, Braxton Deaver. Deaver is an undrafted free agent, but he's making ground on Sandlin. But like I said, if you're only playing one tight end, I think there's better situations. I wouldn't go here.
Yep, I agree. Much more interested in the tight ends on Baltimore if we want to head over to the Baltimore game.
Yeah, so Johnny's a Baltimore homer, so he's going to give us some awesome Baltimore fire right now. Yeah, every tight end on Baltimore is either 64 years old, suspended, or hurt, right? Is that correct, Johnny?
Yeah, so Ben Watson is, he's your 64-year-old. Dennis Pitta's hip is 64 years old. Crockett Gilmore is hurt. Max Williams just recently left practice hurt. And Daniel Brown, isn't he not really an actual tight end, something like that?
Well, I have him questionable anyway.
Yeah, he might actually be hurt as well, too. And so then Nick Boyle is suspended for 10 games. And Darren Waller is suspended for 4 games. So if Max Williams can't go, then Waller is probably a really good play. as just based on the fact that he is suspended for less games than Nick Boyle.
Yeah, and the other thing that's funny with suspensions, it's hard for guys to make the team if they're suspended the first 4 games, so a lot of times the coaches will give them a lot of opportunity. And then in these meaningless games, play the guy that's suspended if he gets hurt. Oh well, he's already out 4 games. No big deal.
Yeah. And then, like with Nick Boyle, if he's suspended for 10 games, there's really no point to get an extended look at him at all. So.
Yeah, right. Like bring him back for December.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I really like Waller if we know that Max Williams and Daniel Brown are going to miss. I doubt Dennis Pitta plays at all, and I doubt Watson plays much.
Yeah, and even if Max Williams plays, I might think about Max Williams, but I don't think that stops you from playing Waller. It just maybe reduces how much you play Waller.
Yeah, I agree. And Waller is kind of one of those like super athletic receiver type tight ends. So with the Ravens banged up wide receivers, he could even see some looks at wide receiver too.
Yeah, that's interesting. The Ravens seems like half of their wide receiver core is missing. You've got, just run through the whole list here. You got Mike Wallace and Kamar Aiken are the starters. They're okay, but again, they're starters. Shouldn't see too much. Michael Campanaro, it's a hamstring issue, I believe. I've got Chris Matthews. He got hurt today or yesterday. Jeremy Butler's healthy. Chris Moore has been in a walking boot. Chuck Jacobs is there. Kalen Clay, Keenan Reynolds, and then you got Steve Smith on the PUP, Dobson Collins, and Rashad Perryman on the PUP list.
Yeah, and Jeremy Butler, I think, is the guy I'm really looking at. He played in the regular season last year. He operated as like the wide receiver 3-4 at times when everybody else was dead.
He had 10 targets, 7 receptions, 74 yards against Seattle in the middle of the season.
Yeah, he got some extended looks during the regular season. He has actual NFL experience. He played with Ryan Mallett, who should probably see a good chunk of the time tomorrow. So I think a Ryan Mallett, Jeremy Butler connection is something that we may see a good bit of, especially once Aiken and Wallace come off the field.
Butler was actually a guy I owned on a dynasty team like last summer. There were so many reports about him like completely obliterating camp, just shining through as the top weapon. And he showed it in the regular season. He does have some talent, so it'd be interesting to see what he does. Do you like Butler or Matthews, Seth?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I was reading through the transcript of Coach Harbaugh's press conference I think it was from yesterday, and somebody specifically asked him. Let me pull it here. I wrote it down. They asked him about. They asked him about Jeremy Butler, and he basically identified Butler. He said Butler, Chris Matthews, and Keenan Reynolds are basically the guys that he's interested to see, not counting the guys that are hurt, obviously. And he said those are the guys that we'll be looking at the next 3 weeks. And then Chris Matthews went down to practice today. So basically, I'm like, I'll listen to the coach here. Keenan Reynolds and Butler.
Nice.
Yeah, and Reynolds is interesting too because he might see some looks at running back too because he was drafted as a running back wide receiver combo and he used to be a quarterback. So I mean, you might even see him throw the ball.
Yeah, you could see some sweeps or something, but not out of the backfield as a running back. Obviously, that's as crowded as can be.
Right.
But moving on to the running back position, Johnny, I know, is super into Terrence West just based on early reports in camp. I'm a huge Kenneth Dixon fan, and earlier this week he was getting some rave reviews. He's a fantastic receiver. He was PFF's top-graded running back top-graded receiving running back, and he also ranked first in yards per route run among all draft-eligible running backs last season. Johnny, you want to state your case for Terrence West?
The thing about Terrence West that I really like is that he's kind of like a coveted prospect by the Ravens. I don't know why, but they wanted to draft him. They were really upset they missed out on him. The reason they couldn't draft him is because they couldn't trade up on the compensatory picks. So he was taken by the Browns before they could get him. As soon as he was a free agent, they picked him up. They gave him snaps in the regular season last year. They let him compete with Buck Allen. Apparently, he's been an absolute stud in the preseason. He's losing weight. The team just keeps constantly talking about him. All the beats are talking about him. Kenneth Dixon missed a bunch of time early on, so he kind of fell behind Terrence West, and I think West is going to see a lot of work because the Ozzie and the team want him to make the team.
Yeah, that's spot on there. It's basically it's going to be a two-man competition here. And they need to figure out what they've got in West or Dixon.
Yeah, and I think Dixon will see a lot of work too. I don't think Buck and Forsett are going to play much at all, and I don't think anyone cares about Steven Houston.
Yeah, it's another situation.
Who are you going to take there, Johnny? Kenneth Dixon with the receiving prowess that kind of helps him on DraftKings, or West, the guy that everyone in Baltimore seems to like? If you had to start one.
If I could only pick one, it'd probably be West, but I'm going to have exposure to both for sure. And I think you could put both on your team in both of your running back spots if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. You might as well just take them both. Why not, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Johnny, Ryan Mallett, how many teams are you going to have him on?
I'll have him on a few. The thing I like about Ryan Mallett is that he's been in the system. He had regular season NFL experience with Mark Trestman and with the receivers that he's going to be throwing the ball to. He should play. They've said that he's going to start and he's going to get an extended look because they're essentially figuring that he's going to be the backup, and they don't really expect either of the two Johnsons to make the team. So first half's worth or a quarter and a half's worth of Ryan Mallett throwing to receivers he's familiar with in a system that he knows, I think is a decent bet for some production. I don't think he's one of the best quarterback plays, but I think he's a pretty decent play.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm seeing some love for Johnson. Well, I guess I should clarify. I assume they mean Josh Johnson. He's coming in next because they have a Jared Johnson too. Yeah, I still think it's Mallett.
Yeah. I don't think that from all I read from the beats, they don't really expect either of those guys to make the team, and so I don't know why there's a whole lot of reason. Unless Mallett really falls on his face, I don't see why they're gonna get extended runs for these guys.
All right, my two top quarterbacks, more so than Mallett, in my opinion, come from the next slate of games, which is New Orleans. The next game, New Orleans versus New England. Garrett Grayson, who was picked in the third round last year, the coach said he's going to get the bulk of playing time, with Breeze playing one series and McCown seeing one quarter. I know the first quarter is the most valuable, but I mean, like, that's guaranteed volume, straight from the coach's mouth, that he's going to see likely almost three quarters of playing time. He did well in the preseason last year. I think he ranked top 12 in attempts. Seth, are you into Garrett Grayson at all?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna have to jump off here after this here in a second, but I want to stay for this game for sure because I think this is a good money game here. The Saints and the Patriots practiced together this week, had joint scrimmages, so we've actually seen some. It's not a guarantee that the scrimmage plays out the way a game plays, but absolutely, Sean Payton said that Drew Brees would play very little and would yield to Luke McCown early on so that they could get a good long look at Garrett Grayson. And he's probably looking at as much or more playing time than anybody else on this slate.
Yeah. The downside is that he might not be very good, but it's still a ton of time that you have to consider him. And then another interesting So would you say, where would you rank Grayson? Is he one of your top quarterbacks?
Based on talent, I don't think so. Like, I think I'm going to lean more towards, like, Garoppolo, who we'll get to in a minute, Colt McCoy, Chase Daniel for the Eagles, I don't mind. Like, I'm targeting those guys that are coming in second. If I'm going with one of these rookie guys that's going to play a lot, I think I'd rather have Paxton Lynch on Denver, that you'll get to here in a minute. He's looking at a whole half, and he'll actually have some decent receivers to throw to.
That's true. Yeah, so let's... Go ahead.
So to me, Lynch is just right there with Garrett Grayson. It's close, but I would lean Lynch.
Well, I think the difference there is Lynch, according to their head coach, is going to play the second half, whereas with Garrett Grayson, he's going to play more than maybe 2.5 quarters.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. There's.
I just chased the guaranteed snaps there.
I mean,
yeah, I've got no issue with that at all. Like, you can Garrett Grayson 2 1/4 quarters or whatever you get out of him.
Mm-hmm.
He'll get his passing attempts.
Yeah, but then on the other side of the ball, I know you're big into Garoppolo this week. Would he be your top quarterback?
It's tough because I do want to say, like, Belichick still hasn't 100% said what he's going to do. Even the report I read today said that Garoppolo doesn't even know what his plans are. So
that's so Belichick.
I've been beating this drum all week, though, even with I've been beating this drum all week. People are saying, well, aren't they going to protect Jimmy because he's got to start the first 4 games? And I'm like, what? And put Brady out there? Or what are you expecting here?
Yeah, I think Garoppolo is a fine play. I mean, he's always been like a preseason stud, and it was a similar situation last year.
One of our commenters on YouTube is saying Brady is out, and it came out this evening. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that Belichick's actually honest in the preseason. He'll tell you what he's going to do, and you can believe him for the most part.
Yep, here it is. Pat's plan to sit Brady in first preseason game. Came out at 7:15. So.
Yeah, I mean, this time last season, we count it as the second of 5 weeks. We count the Hall of Fame game as the first week. But in that second week, Garoppolo played the 4th most snaps and threw the 2nd most attempts of all quarterbacks that week. And it was kind of pretty much the same situation that we have now, where they suspected Brady was going to be suspended, but they weren't sure. But now we know for sure. So I'm thinking the volume is going to be very similar to what it was this time last season, in which case I think Garoppolo is probably one of your top options, if not the chalk QB.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I'm about to jump off here. I got to run do some stuff getting late here in Ohio, but I will give you guys a parting shot real fast. Some of the people that are sharper players on Twitter have been saying, "Oh, keep giving away my sleepers," or "Oh, don't write this article. You're going to inform all the masses." I hate beating people where 33% of this GPP we're in are playing a guy that's not even playing. I would rather people be informed. But a lot of people have sent me lineups on Twitter. And trust me, like, out of hundreds of people that sent me lineups, nobody's even come close to the same thing. Don't be afraid of what other people are playing. Don't be afraid of playing the chalk, what you think is the chalk. Play the guys that you think are going to do the best, regardless of how many lines you're playing.
Yep, I completely agree with that. Take your shots.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Seth. Everyone check out Seth's article on Roto Grinders. Should be up tonight or early tomorrow. He let me get a sneak preview and read it early. It's awesome, as usual. Seth, you're welcome on anytime. You always bring the fire. Any last secret tips for us? Any guys we haven't got to that you really like?
I'll give you one last tight end for the Broncos that people may or may not be aware of. is let me scroll to the end here. Virgil Green's the starter, but interestingly, Jeff Hewerman got listed as the co-starter essentially. So the Broncos drafted him in 2015, and then he got injured and he sat the whole year. So essentially, he's kind of a rookie, but they really want to see what they've got there if they believe he can actually be the starter. I think he could see a pretty heavy workload. So, like, as if there weren't already enough tight ends.
Yeah, and I agree. And Virgil Green's always kind of been a blocking tight end, so maybe Huron's the guy who's going to get a lot of passes his way. All right,
so I think with that, I'm out of here, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, man.
See you, Seth.
Yeah.
And guys, make sure you follow Seth on Twitter at Seth A. Yates DFS. That is where you will find the links to his article. Obviously, we will tweet it out once the article comes out as well.
Shout out to Steven Seufert. Definitely didn't pronounce that the right way, but that was the dude on our YouTube comments who told us about Brady being confirmed out that we missed. That's another thing, too, by the way. We have YouTube comments now, which is really exciting. Johnny just figured that out yesterday. So that's pretty cool. I think this is going to be like all our preseason videos and podcasts are just going to be like super informal. I think that's okay. More of like a hangout than a podcast, I guess. But we have some really cool guests coming your way aside from just Seth. Evan Silva already confirmed he'd be on one of our podcasts, which is huge. He's the king of fantasy football, a guy me and Johnny both admire and respect a lot. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want anything else you want to add?
Yeah, let's keep going through it. Okay, so back to the Saints-Patriots game. There's another running back that's probably, I would say, one of the more chalky running backs. Dion Lewis is on the pup. LeGarrette Blount is probably not.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say Daniel Lasco.
No. I'm gonna bring up Lasco too, but Brandon Bolden, they know what he is. He's a special teamer. James White, he's more of a receiver. They know what he is. So one guy that they're probably going to really be looking at is Tyler Gaffney. He's been injured a lot, but the Patriots seem to have kind of coveted him, and now he's finally healthy. So I think they're going to give him a long look because he has a shot to make the team. And he has a shot to have, a legitimate role since they don't really have a whole lot of depth at running back outside of Dion Lewis this season. What do you think
in 2 consecutive years, Gaffney has gone down in week 1 with a season-ending – week 1 of training camp, season-ending injury. This is a guy that outside of just like a few practices and his college tape – the Patriots really haven't seen much from him, so it makes a sense they're going to want to give him a lot of playing time. And he is fighting for that kind of role. You got to assume kind of Blount makes the team and James White and Dion Lewis make the team. So he has that like backup to Blount role where he's fighting up against like Donald Brown. And I think one other guy. Johnny, you like slammed that glass and it just was deafening in my ears. Yeah, so I think he gets a lot of playing time. I'm excited about him. I've always wanted to see him play. He's a guy I have still on a few dynasty teams. What makes you interested in Daniel Lasco?
So with Daniel Lasco, the reason that I would, I'm not super stoked about it. But Lasco is sort of like the competing for the role behind Ingram and Hightower. Marcus Murphy isn't really someone that I have really thought about, but he's been competing too. So you could look at Murphy. Cadet and Spiller are kind of like those third down backs. They don't really have, they know what they are. So, Murphy and Lasco are the guys who are kind of competing to be the backup to Ingram's backup. Ingram and Hightower, they know who they are. So if you want to toss in Lasco or Murphy onto some lineups, I think one of them probably has a shot at the touchdown, and if you get that touchdown, then that pays off at the running back spot.
I don't have any notes on the wide receivers. Josh Hill has been getting some news. Says he's been playing well. Clay Harbor also as the tight end on the Patriots, fighting for the third tight end job behind Gronk and Bennett. That's pretty much all I have. Besides
that's an interesting thing with Bennett. Is Bennett's never played with the Patriots, and Gronk is going to sit. So Bennett will start. And if we hear that Bennett's going to play, 2 whole series or a whole quarter or something, then he immediately comes into play as one of the top tight end plays, especially since a lot of the wide receivers are going to be limited. So that would be somebody that Garoppolo would probably be looking to a lot on a first series or a first quarter if we hear something like that. As of right now, we have no idea how much Bennett's going to play.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you were making like 12 lineups or something, you could put Bennett on one with Garoppolo as a stack. But, I wouldn't be super stoked about it until we hear more about who is going to be playing.
You want to move on to Jags-Jets?
Yeah, we can.
So I think here's what we're going to do. I think we're just going to finish out these last 2 games. And then I'll talk about wide receivers I like, and then we'll just talk about our ideal chalk cash lineup. How's that sound?
Yeah, we can do that. So so the Jags, you have 4 quarterbacks. They say Brandon Allen is supposed to be like a guy they're really looking at. I probably wouldn't be stoked about any of their quarterbacks, so I'm just going to gloss over that. As for running back on the Jags, Yeldon Ivory are the co-starters. They probably won't play a whole lot. I doubt Denard Robinson is going to play a whole lot since he's been there forever. They know who he is. And Jonas Gray is hurt. So I think we probably see a lot of Corey Grant and Joe Banyard. As for which one you like more, good question. You pretty much just you're flipping a coin on those guys. What are your thoughts on Corey Grant or Joe Banyard, Scott?
I like the lack of depth there. I don't really feel great about either of those guys. I think there's a lot of running backs to like, and I don't think they probably crack my top 5. So I probably won't have too many teams with them, but I do get the reasoning behind it. I'm kind of more into Braden Bowman, who I talked about before. I read a few beat reports about people saying he's just absolutely killing it, and he has crazy chemistry with the backup quarterbacks. They're targeting him often, and he's catching everything, especially in the end zone. He's like way down, buried on the depth chart, but he is getting a lot of buzz. And then the wide receivers, Marquise Lee is hurt. Shaq Evans is hurt. Rashad Green is hurt. I think Arulius Rashad Green is healthy. Rashad Lawrence is hurt. Green is a guy who's interesting. Aurelius Ben is kind of interesting. This is like his last shot in the NFL. And like I said, it's the preseason. Like, he really gives a fuck. So,
he's another one of those guys who's like talented and is just always hurt, never really had a chance.
Yeah.
He's a guy I used to love to have on Madden, but that aside, there's not a whole lot to look at on the Jags. I'm not real interested in the Jags team. I think they're a deep, young, talented team. So there's a lot of guys that they could be looking at. But Braden Bowman is definitely someone interesting, especially who might be playing a lot of the third and fourth quarter, especially if he has familiarity with the quarterbacks who are going to be playing. I think probably more interested in the Jets side. What do you think about Geno Smith? I'm kind of Where are you at on Geno, Scott?
They have 4 quarterbacks, right?
Yes.
Is Fitz playing at all? Do we know?
I believe we don't know exactly what they're going to be doing. Unlikely, but they haven't really said.
Yeah, I'm not too excited about Geno because, like you were saying before, like when you know who a guy is, you don't necessarily need to give him playing time. And they probably know who Geno is. They don't know who Christian Hackenberg is yet, really, except for practice. They haven't seen him in game time decision. Bryce Petty, he's apparently been horrible all camp, but maybe this is a battle between Petty and Hackenberg. If Fitzpatrick's not playing any snaps, maybe Geno Smith's viable, but I don't know. I just don't like Geno, and I think there's way better quarterbacks out there, so I'm kind of ignoring him for the most part.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel. I'm more interested in the running back situation when I look at the Jets. The interesting thing there is that Forte is injured. Bilal Powell is, they know what Bilal Powell is. Kiri Robinson just came off of the PUP. So if we hear that and Bernard Pierce is also hurt, if we hear that Kiri Robinson is not going to play, then I think Dominic Williams and Ramar, however it's pronounced, Morris are both in play. Williams had a pretty decent preseason last year, so we've seen that he can do it. The downside for Morris is that he's also listed as a kick returner. So if he sees a lot of special teams work, he might not see as much of the running back work. So pay attention to Kiri Robinson's status. If he's out, Dominic Williams, I think, is a really good play. But
the cool thing about Kiri Robinson is last season, so like PFF grades every single preseason game. They also keep track of snaps and things like that. Kiri Robinson was our top-graded running back last preseason. And the preseason before that, he was our top-graded running back. I don't know if that necessarily is going to carry over to this season, but he's killed it every preseason so far. And now he has opportunity again as well.
So that's my concern, that if he plays, then I think it's pretty tough to figure out who you are picking from the Jets. But if he sits, it's a big opportunity for Dominic Williams.
Yeah,
I think that's where I'm at. So wide receivers. Decker,
Marshall's
I believe,
is see much. Decker's not going to see much. I think
Decker's hurt,
banged up. Yeah. Devin Smith is on the PUP. What about like Kimbrel Tompkins, Quincy Enunwa, Sharon Peak? Any of those guys?
The problem is that they're like, there's no real injury. Like Devin Smith is on the PUP, but other than that, we don't have a lot of like injuries to really look at. So it's such a deep wide receiver group with not anybody hurt that who knows, like, Sharon Peak or Quincy Enunwa, they get like 3 targets or something.
Yeah, but do they have a third wide receiver on that team? If Devin Smith is out, it's Brandon Marshall and then Decker in the slot. So who's the third outside? Yeah.
It's a complete wide open competition for that third spot.
So maybe they get an extended look at Tompkins and Enunwa? No?
It's a good guess. I mean,
I don't know.
I know there's some talk of this Peak kid, and I know some people have mentioned him in chat.
Yeah, I've heard that too, yeah.
But who knows how much these guys are going to play. I mean, I think I would probably prefer to play Jace Amaro over any of the wide receivers. What do you think?
Why Jace?
So he is not listed as the starting tight end.
Really? Who's the starter?
Kellen Davis.
Wow.
Amaro has...
Do you still have baby Gronk on the team?
Sudfeld? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but he's awful. But anyways, so, I mean, Jace Amaro has pretty much been like a complete disappointment for the Jets. But he's like a really athletic, talented guy. He's one of those athletic guys that have an advantage against, second, third string defenses.
Okay.
So he also has an opportunity to play some wide receiver spots. especially when Gailey is spreading them out. So I think you're more likely that Jace Amaro is competing for a starting role or the backup role, whereas these other wide receivers, we really don't know who the guy is that's competing for that job. I mean, we know for tight end it's Davis and Amaro who are kind of competing. We know Zach Sudfeld's no good, and I don't really know anything about the guys behind them, but I'm doubtful that they're actually competing for a significant role.
Yeah, you make some compelling points. Yeah, I don't know if Kyrie Robinson's playing. I just looked into our chat. We're getting roasted. Yeah, he's
unlikely to play.
He's unlikely to play? Okay.
He's been doing like team drills and stuff. He's practiced a little bit. He just came off the pup like end of last week or beginning of this week.
Okay, so Forte has the hamstring. Kyrie Robinson has the leg. What does their depth chart look like? Let's just go back to the running back. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the running backs for a second.
You pretty much have the two. You have Dominic Williams and Romar Morris.
All right. So if we're down at 2, that seems like, or what about Stacy?
What about who?
Zach Stacy.
Is he still on the team? I don't think he is on the team.
We stink. I think he's on the team.
No, Zach Stacy's not on the team. We have Matthew.
You're right.
Matthew Tucker, Romar Morris, Dominic Williams will be the only healthy ones if Kyrie Robinson sits, and Matthew Tucker played for the Eagles in 2013. He's kind of like a fringe guy who's bounced around. He hasn't really done a whole lot. I doubt he has much chance of making the team, especially as deep as they are at running back. So, I think. But
we boiled it down at 2 or 3.
Dominic Williams is the play.
Yeah.
Between those two, because Romar Morris, like I said earlier, and they're mentioning in chat too, he's going to return kicks too, so he probably won't see as many snaps at running back.
Okay. All right, Broncos Bears. By the way, again, guys, we're just going over the slate today. Like, if there's breaking news tomorrow, obviously, like, always pivot. We're not going to have a podcast tomorrow, so just stay on track of RotoWorld, Twitter, whatever, and always be ready to adapt and change. But yeah, Broncos Bears.
Yeah. So the interesting thing with the Broncos is the whole quarterback situation. I mean, Mark Sanchez, they pretty much know that it's his job, as much as they want to play games with the media. So it's kind of like, and Trevor Siemian, I think, is kind of just, they're seeing what he is. They're using him to kind of push Sanchez a little bit, maybe push Paxton Lynch. Lynch was their first rounder. They say that Lynch is going to play the whole second half. Siemian and Sanchez are going to split the first half. So you have no idea how much Sanchez is going to play. You have no idea how much Siemian's going to play. So I don't think you can really rely on either of those guys. If you had to pick one, it'd be Lynch. And we know that the Broncos are really deep at wide receiver. So those are some decently talented wide receivers that Paxton Lynch is going to be throwing to. And he's a first-round pick. He's a talented prospect. So he's an interesting play. What do you think about Paxton Lynch, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I brought it up with Seth. I think he's a really good play. He's going to get the entire second half. I've heard beat reporters saying he was very inconsistent early on, but he's kind of fallen into a nice little groove now. I guess. I still like Garrett Grayson, and I like Garoppolo more. I don't know if he's going to be good either. He's a rookie. This is his first serious snaps against actual talent. Not too excited about him, but I get it. I mean, he's seen snaps. So that Huerman was the tight end that Seth talked about. We like him too, right?
Yeah, Huerman's interesting. I mean, the other tight ends are really nobody's on the team. He was injured. He's kind of, a second-year rookie per se, kind of like a Travis Kelce situation. You look at Travis Kelce when he got hurt and then he came back and just absolutely dominated the preseason in his second year and then took everybody by storm. So, the tight ends is a tough position to learn in the NFL, so a year off is probably not all that hurtful for him. So I kind of consider him in the same area as Austin Hooper.
After Virgil, it's him and then Garrett Graham, Henry Coble, and Manasseh Garner.
Yeah, it's Heuerman's a good play. He has a chance to take over the job from Virgil Green, who's never really done a whole lot since he's been given, significant role. So I like.
Yeah, this looks like a serious, actual camp battle. So maybe they give him an extended look.
Yeah, agree with you. Running back is what's interesting.
Running backs, okay.
Everybody wants to play Devontae Booker. Is he going to get a ton of work? Probably. They want him to push CJ Anderson. So I think Booker is definitely an interesting play. I will have some Booker.
See, I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing Booker is like the automatic backup to CJ Anderson, and Hillman's the guy who's fighting for a job.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, Hillman is Hillman's not – Hillman, they know what he is. Booker is a guy who they haven't seen play. I mean, they have made comments like that if Booker can push Anderson, maybe he can take third down work and stuff like that from Anderson. I mean, I think Booker is going to get a ton of run. He's a guy they drafted highly. There's really no one behind him. We don't really expect Hillman to make much noise. He'll probably be the third wide receiver. But
I like Booker a lot in terms of talent, and I really like his fit in this QB offense. It's just a matter of whether or not he gets the snaps. I mean, they're probably not going to give CJ Anderson too much playing time after his more recent scare. Juwan Thompson, Ronnie Hillman, you think those guys get too much play?
No. I mean, Thompson is what he is. He's kind of just a plotter type guy. Booker has seen passing work in his career, so I think he's going to get a lot of run.
Capri Bibbs, Cyrus Gray.
What's that?
Capri Bibbs and Cyrus Gray. What about those guys?
I know a lot of people like Capri Bibbs, but I mean, Booker is the guy who they took with a premium draft pick for a running back, so I think he's going to get a lot of work this week. And I think the whole preseason he's going to get a lot of work.
Wide receivers, they're really deep at. Maybe too much so. Cody Latimer has had hype for forever, but never delivered.
Yeah, this is kind of Latimer's last chance. So you could play Latimer, I guess. Not real stoked about it, but.
All right, I'm more into the Bears. I'm really into the Bears.
Let's talk Bears.
I like Braverman a lot. I think he's like an actual really good talent. Eddie Royal's not playing in the slot. He's banged up, I think. And Braverman was PFF's top 5 graded wide receiver, one of their top 5 graded wide receivers last season. It looks like he's going to get some action in the return game as well. I think he's a really good talent. Kevin White, they're probably interested in getting him some snaps after he missed all of last season.
Yeah, I think Braverman and White are both great plays.
Yeah.
So you could play both of them, alternate them, and that goes to with who you're going to stack them with is probably Brian Hoyer. I know you looked up some stuff on Hoyer. What did you find?
I actually didn't write it down. I forget, but
all right. So what you told me earlier is that there's a possibility that Hoyer might play a whole half or get 2 full quarters.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah.
If you're going to get 2 full quarters out of a guy like Hoyer, who's been an actual decent NFL starter at times, especially if he's going to be playing with someone like Kevin White, who's like a super highly talented prospect, that's someone you really want to look for. So a Hoyer, Kevin White stack is something that you could definitely do. Yeah. And then there is
it looks like Alshon Jeffrey has a mild hamstring injury. Eddie Royal is in the concussion protocol. Josh Bellamy is on the PUP. Derek Keaton missed a practice on Monday. Yeah, so it looks like there's the Bears are missing some depth at the wide receiver position, and hopefully Braverman's a guy who can capitalize.
Yep, agree with
Kevin
you.
White, yeah.
Braverman and Kevin White, I like them both. I like Hoyer too. So running back, I had thought I was interested in Jordan Howard. I still am. I think he's going to get some third down and goal line work, so he's somebody you might be able to throw in. But I think there's some concern where the Bears really aren't settled on their roles. So I think even Langford might see some preseason work, probably Jaquiz Rogers. So there's a lot of
Kadeem Carey, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I was getting there. I'm talking about third down work. For them.
Okay.
And then as for early down plotting work, I think Kadeem Carey could see that. And that's kind of what you're looking for, is you're looking for a guy to get a bunch of those plotter type carries. And we don't really know exactly who it's going to be, and we don't really know who's going to be getting that third down work there or who's going to be getting the goal line carries. I think if you picked a Bears running back, it's definitely Jordan Howard.
Yeah.
He's the only one that they haven't really seen from, and they picked with like a decently premium pick. So you could sprinkle him in. I wouldn't be super stoked about it. I'd be more interested in the wide receivers there. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I like Jordan Howard a lot, and I think the Bears don't like Langford.
Yeah, I think there's concern there.
Since February, they've been talking about a committee backfield replacing Matt Forte. Every time they've talked about Langford, they've immediately followed it up by saying, "Oh, but Kadeem Carey has been great as well." Like, they will not say his name without immediately referencing another running back on the roster. Kadeem Carey, they've got a look at him, I guess, but he's also been banged up a lot throughout his 2 seasons in the NFL. And he's still young. He's still 23 years old. So I'm not ready to give up on him. I think it is like an actual – they want to see what all these guys have to offer.
Yep. Especially because Fox likes committees.
At least. Yeah, exactly.
So, not stoked there. Tight ends. There's a
Zach Miller concussion, right?
Yes. So he's probably not going to play.
Yeah.
Tony Moeaki is a guy who's been a really interesting prospect through the years. He had that ridiculous one-handed catch that everyone probably remembers when he played for the Chiefs. We all thought he was going to be a stud after that, and he kind of fizzled out with some injuries and stuff. So he's a guy that could get some extended run. He's definitely looking to try and make the team, looking to try and probably be the backup to Zach Miller, who's pretty much the unquestioned starter, though I'm probably not going to touch him. There's definitely some other tight ends that I would prefer. Thoughts?
Yeah, there's just so many tight ends. I'm not that interested in him.
Yeah. And the big thing, too, is just everyone needs to pay attention. Roto-World is like definitely your number one resource, the blurbs. There is going to be stuff that changes. We're going to have guys ruled out. Guys who we thought weren't going to play are going to play. That is what you want to be looking for. If a team rules out players and they're down to 2 running backs or 4 wide receivers, then you know these guys are going to get playing time. So look for that type of stuff. We don't know everything yet. You're going to know a lot more tomorrow, about an hour before lock. So make sure you pay attention and make sure you use late swap.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. All right. Next up, I had a request from one of our listeners, Joe Payano. He heard me talk about my strategy of loading up on wide receivers in preseason. And I was only half kidding. I did this last year, and I had a ton of success with it. So it's just something I really might play around with this season. So I went and I took a look at some wide receivers I might be interested in preseason. We just talked about Daniel Braverman on Chicago. there's not in this slate, but Jeff Janis, who has always been fantastic in preseason. Last year, he scored the 6th most fantasy points at the position last season. And then the year before that, he had 2 catches in the preseason. And he went for 67 yards and 2 touchdowns. Though surprisingly, he was not the top preseason wide receiver in terms of fantasy points for Green Bay. That was Miles White. He's not white, but his last name was White. There's Adam Thielen on Minnesota, who might be #sneaky athletic. He had 4 rushing attempts in the regular season last year. He went for 8, 14, 26, and 41 yards. He had the 2nd highest yards per carry among all players last year, minimum 0 carries. Then there's all the white guys on New England: Chris Hogan, Danny Amendola, Julian Edelman, maybe Hogan, who might have something more to prove, and he's the only one who's not really banged up. Brian Walters on Jacksonville, fighting for slot duties with Rashad Green, scored the 18th most points among wide receivers in preseason last year. There's Adam Humphries, who scored the same amount of fantasy points as Brian Walters. Coder says he's locked in as the number 3 guy, so maybe doesn't see too many snaps, maybe just plays with the first team offenses he's got to look for 2 weeks from now. We talked about him a bit before. There's Greg Salas on the Bills, who is also a top 20 fantasy preseason wide receiver. There's Jared Abbrederis, or as we in the industry call him, Jared Abracadabra, because that's what his unpronounceable name autocorrects to on my phone. And because hopefully he'll bring us some magic to our preseason lineups. Last season, Green Bay had 2 wide receivers in the top 6 in preseason fantasy points. And they're obviously not sold on Janis as the wide receiver 3 guy, so maybe there's an actual competition there. There's Griff Whalen fighting for wide receiver 4 duties in Miami. He's likely never going to get meaningful snaps in the regular season, which means he's exactly the kind of guy I like to chase. This is his time to shine. Campanaro with Baltimore, who Johnny likes. He just needs to get healthy.
If Campanaro plays in the preseason, he's a great play. Kid's really talented.
All right, I'm done. I think that's almost every. There's like one guy in the Colts I can't remember, but what do you think about those white wide receivers, Johnny, and my strategy?
I mean, I think the thing that's interesting, like, you know, as racist as I guess it would be, is that white wide receivers are often slot wide receivers.
Yeah.
And those are valuable in the preseason because there's often they're not competing for an outside role with the stud, the stud X receiver or the stud Z or whatever. So they're competing for an easier position essentially. And the, scrub rookie wide receiver type guy or scrub rookie type quarterback type guys are throwing those types of easier routes more often. So those are valuable targets and snaps in the preseason.
All right, we haven't talked any defenses. Washington, we like, I guess.
Hang on. Yeah, I mean, you really want to think about who's going to be playing against the worst quarterbacks. You don't want to play.
Let's be real. This is a coin flip. This is such a coin flip.
Yes, but you don't want to play a team like the Eagles D because they're playing against, legitimate Winston and Glennon. You're not really.
But also Tampa Bay. They're up against like Chase Daniels, who lit up preseason last year, and
Bradford. So that's a team you're not really looking at. So that's a group to avoid. Since like Seth said, since the Falcons are looking to pull Schaub and Ryan early, the Skins are definitely a defense that I would be targeting. They're probably one of the higher ones on my list.
Yeah.
Since we know that Flacco is not playing, and the Panthers, run some pretty good schemes, they're definitely an interesting team to look at as well, especially with the Ravens being so banged up at wide receiver. The limited Jags corners aren't that big of a concern.
Honestly, what about the Bears? Because Sanchez isn't good. Simeon,
whatever. I don't even know who he is. Paxton Lynch, rookie.
Yes.
That seems
The Bears are absolutely. They were the first defense that I had on my list. Depends how much Sanchez is going to play. If Sanchez plays a whole quarter, that hurts, but doubtful. So the Bears are getting Simeon and Lynch, who are both brand new to the NFL. So the Bears are definitely in play. So I would say I'm probably looking at the Bears, the Skins, and the Panthers are probably the three that I'm looking at, I think. And don't be afraid to play a quarterback and the opposing defense, because it's preseason. It's just not really that much of a concern for you. You're looking for just a few points, so you can play both. That's not a big deal. Any thoughts on defenses, Scott?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Everything else is just going to be a coin flip. I mean, it's so hard to say with preseason, but yeah, try and target inexperienced and hashtag bad quarterbacks. I think we do a good job of that, looking at Washington and Chicago specifically.
Yep.
All right, you want to just try and come up with like a super chalky, maybe cash lineup. Looking at my notes, ASJ is my top tight end by a good amount. I know Seth was a little more hesitant. What do you think?
I would say it's ASJ and Hooper for me, so I'm okay with either of those guys.
Okay. Yeah, Hooper's probably my number two. Although me and Seth did also like the guy on Philly.
Yeah.
I'd say it's ASJ and Hooper. Running back one is Lord Byron.
Yeah.
Okay. An injury could maybe change that, I guess, but even if
he's probably the top running back play.
Even if Barner still plays, yeah, he might be the top running back play.
Yeah.
Quarterback, my QB1 is my QB is Grayson.
For me, it'd be Garoppolo. Now that we know that Brady is sitting.
Actually, yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it is Garoppolo.
Yeah,
but Grayson's my number two. Just because I know Garoppolo has done well in the preseason.
Yes,
he looked good last year.
Has the experience.
Grayson's more. What's that?
Has the experience, knows the system. Starting, should play a half. He's got everything going for him.
I also talked about this on like one of our MFL 10 podcasts, but Castle was a top 10 quarterback in terms of attempts, fantasy points, yards, touchdowns that season when Brady went down. I'm a huge Belichick truther. Yep. I think they're going to be fine regardless of who's starting. All right, So our quarterback's Garoppolo, tight ends ASJ, RB1 is Lord Byron, wide receiver 1, you want to say is Braverman?
I'm going to go with Jeremy Butler.
We could play both. Is Braverman in your top three?
Butler's probably Braverman's definitely. I can't decide between Braverman and White, but I think they're probably both equal. I think you play either of them. So.
I'm just worried Kevin White, just with his like injury history or whatever, and you want him to be their number one, whereas Braverman could sit a little while behind Eddie Royal, who they paid the big money to. I'm projecting more snaps for Braverman, and although White is a transcendent talent, top 5 pick, definitely could blow up with just a few targets. I still think I'm going Braverman here in the first week. Maybe it shifts more towards White next week. But I'll have Braverman and Butler in my top wide receivers. Do you want to have an RB2?
The running back 2 for me would probably be Terrence West. I think you could also play Dixon.
Yeah, mine would be Dixon, but I get the argument for West, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and then, but that is as well. I think you can also make the argument for Dominic Williams on the Jets.
Okay.
Which I think would be the reasonable flex to go with.
I think my flex or running back 3 would be Cameron Artis-Payne.
I get that, but from everything I'm reading about Weger, that's my concern. I don't know how much CAP is going to play. I mean, obviously we're gonna have exposure to all these guys.
That's true. We said Marshall was in play also.
Yeah, Keith Marshall's in play too. Not as stoked about him as the other guys, but
Butler, Braverman, and then Keenan Reynolds on Baltimore. We were kind of into.
yeah, I would probably
Hardy, Aldrick Robinson. Probably Aldrick Robinson.
Aldrick Robinson is probably one of the. For me, it's probably Aldrick Robinson and Jeremy Butler, who are probably my top two plays, just because I think they're going to get a good bit of run with the ones and twos.
All right, so here's what I'd have: Garoppolo QB, RB1 Lord Byron, RB2 Kenneth Dixon, flex Cameron Artis-Payne, wide receiver 1, Braverman, wide receiver 2 Butler, wide receiver 3 Aldrick Robinson. And what would yours be?
Mine would probably be Garoppolo, Byron Marshall, Terrence West, Jeremy Butler, Aldrick Robinson. As for wide receiver 3, probably somewhere between Rashad Ross and Kevin White.
Yeah, I like Ross too.
And then tight end, I would go with Hooper. And flex would probably be Dominic Williams, so long as we get a little more clarity there.
And then defense, either Washington or Chicago, right? You said you also liked Carolina.
Yeah, I also like Carolina. I mean, if you don't like Ryan Mallett, if you think Ryan Mallett sucks, then you should be playing Carolina because he's the best quarterback playing tomorrow for them, and it's only going to get worse behind him. So,
how long has this podcast been? I have no idea. I forgot to time it.
Not sure, but I'd say we can call it at this point.
All right.
What do you think?
Kenny Bell was another wide receiver we brought up.
Yep.
Also Humphreys. Chase Daniels in play as a quarterback.
Yeah. Ultimately, I would recommend playing multiple lineups.
Waller was a tight end we liked a lot. Yeah, definitely play multiple lineups.
I'll probably play 12. You should look. I mean, if you're only going to play 4 or 5, that's probably a good idea as well. But I would not really suggest playing one lineup in preseason. It's very, very variance-filled.
All right, well, signing off, I'm Scott Barrett.
And I'm John Proctor. Follow Scott at his new stupid Twitter handle, at Scott Barrett DFB. And you'll find me at SuperDuperman22, my AIM screen name from 6th grade. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll try and tweet out a bunch tomorrow. I'm sure Scott will as well. We'll try to do our best to keep you informed as the news comes in.
Good luck, guys.
Good luck.